they're blaming human error for this, but how on earth can this happen?
Well, I think that's a really good question. This is an extremely serious security breach, and I think there's very great questions that need to be asked about how this could happen, why there aren't proper systems in place to prevent this. You have officers in Northern Ireland and their families. They're working immensely hard to keep the streets of Northern Ireland safe, but also to deal with terror threats and to deal with personal threats to their security as well. So it's immensely important that everything possible is done to safeguard their security as well. So that means both looking into this data breach and how it could have happened, but also making sure that there are proper security arrangements in place for all of those officers and their families, and they can have that reassurance as well.
Do you think their safety has actually been jeopardised here?
I'm sure that's what they will be looking at. We've got meetings taking place today, and I know that the police service in Northern Ireland will be taking this immensely seriously. I know that the government will be taking this immensely seriously as well. But it's just very important that those assurances are given to officers and their families, who will obviously, understandably, be concerned.
And can I ask you about the Bibby Stockholm barge that, of course, there's been a lot of controversy about this week? Lee Anderson, the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, said that migrants who don't want to go on the barge should, in his words, F off back to France. The government has said that they stand by his comments. Is it an appropriate phrase for somebody who represents a political party?
No, it's clearly wrong. And this is ramping up the rhetoric, and as a result, really, to just try and distract from the fact that the government is failing. Instead of ramping up the rhetoric, instead of promoting division, what they should be doing is getting on with sorting the problems out. Rishi Sunak's plan is just not working at the moment. We've got the crossings in June and July are higher than they were last year. Also got 10,000 more people in hotels compared to when Rishi Sunak promised to end hotel use altogether. And the asylum system just feels broken, border security is being undermined. What we need to do is go properly after the criminal gangs that are making huge amounts of money from the dangerous boat crossings, and also clear the asylum backlog. That's what Labour would do. We've set out a new fast-track system to do that, so we can end hotel use, the barges, the bases, all of that, and get back to a proper functioning system.
But you say he's using divisive language, but there'll be many within the Conservative Party and many in the country that will agree with what he says, and they will look at what you're saying and saying you're not actually listening to what a lot of people in the country think about a lot of these illegal migrants.
Well, I think what most people want to see is strong border security and also a fair and properly controlled and managed asylum system. So the UK does our bit alongside other countries to help those who have fled persecution and conflict. But so we also have proper border security, and we don't have these dangerous boat crossings that are undermining that and are also putting lives at risk. So you have to do both of those things. At the moment, we've got neither of those things. We've got an asylum system that's broken and in chaos, and also the dangerous boat crossings that are being driven by criminal gangs whose profits have soared from just a few £1 million 4 or 5 years ago to probably nearer £200 million right now. So that's why you have to go after the criminal gangs. You have to do everything possible to prevent these dangerous boat crossings, and you also have to clear the asylum backlog, and those are the things that Labour would do.
The Sun says, though, it's just Labour and lefty lawyers moaning about the barge, and that actually, you know, the government is stealing a march from you in terms of messaging on this.
The thing is, though, that's all the government is doing, is chasing headlines. They're not actually sorting out the problem. You know, if you've got 10,000 additional people in hotels, these costly hotels, even just in the last 6 months, the government is now spending probably around £5,000 a minute on hotel use, rather than going back to the low-cost, long-standing asylum accommodation that we used to use. That is costing the taxpayer billions of pounds. Probably in the course just of your programme alone this morning, the government will have spent nearly £1 million on hotel accommodation. That is just unfair on the taxpayer. It also means you've got a broken asylum system. We've got to turn this around. We've got to clear the backlog, end the chaos, and also save the taxpayer billions of pounds as well.
Labour today are talking about crime. You want a new commission to draw up reforms to increase the number of criminals caught and brought to justice. This commission that you want to draw up, what will it achieve that the police service aren't achieving? Because some people will look at this and say, you're just creating another layer of middle management. What people really want is more bobbies on the beat.
We agree you need more bobbies on the beat. So Labour's plan is for 13,000 more neighbourhood police and PCSOs out in communities. We would also fast-track the recruitment of detectives, where there's a 7,000 shortage of detectives. So you need to do that on policing. But what we also need is new partnerships between the police and the prosecution, the Crown Prosecution Service, and to get rid of some of the layers of bureaucracy between them. 90% of crimes are not being solved now, and you've got this two-thirds drop in the proportion of crimes that are being charged under the Conservatives. That's undermining the rule of law, it's undermining justice, it means more criminals are getting off and more victims are being let down. So it's deeply damaging, but Conservative ministers are doing nothing. That's why we're bringing this commission together, former chief constables, prosecutors and experts, to work on the practical changes that we need to make sure that more criminals can be charged and that there's more justice to keep us safe on the streets.
But is the problem, you know, a commission and more middle management? If 90% of crimes aren't being solved, isn't the problem fundamentally the police?
So it's at every stage in the process. So some of this is about needing to improve what's happening in policing. That's why we need the additional neighbourhood police, the additional detectives in post. So you're absolutely right, we have to do that. But I've also heard many cases where victims and the police are saying, well, we've got all of the evidence, but it's the Crown Prosecution Service who are not charging it. And you get this standoff between the police and prosecutors blaming each other for the fact that cases just aren't going to court, and huge long delays, which means victims drop out. So the reason we've put this commission together, and this is a commission to work with us in opposition, so by the time we get to the election, we've got clear plans in place to cut the bureaucracy, increase charging, get justice for victims, is to work with us on what those practical details are. It's the sort of leadership that the government should be showing, and for 13 years they just haven't.
Final thought before you leave us. Nadine Dorries, Labour's Chris Bryant, wants her held to the same standards as a councillor. She's a Mid-Bedfordshire MP, hasn't appeared in Parliament for a very long time. He says if she was a councillor, she would cease to be a councillor. It would trigger a by-election if she failed to attend any meetings for 6 months. Would Labour support forcing Nadine Dorries out of Parliament?
Well, that's an issue for Parliament. But look, Nadine Dorries, I mean, what on earth is she up to? She's standing down, she's not standing down. It all seems to be to do with the chaos of Boris Johnson's House of Lords nominees, and we've got Liz Truss's House of Lords nominees coming down the track as well. All of this, I think, shows the chaos in the Conservative Party and the Conservative government.
But it does not also show something's wrong with Parliament if MPs are allowed to use their time to present TV programmes and not see their constituents and vote in Parliament. Is there something wrong with our parliamentary system?
Yeah, and look, clearly there's a serious problem here because Nadine Dorries is clearly letting her constituents down. That's why we need a by-election as soon as possible. And that's why we've got Labour candidates setting out proper ways to stand up for the people of Mid-Bedfordshire. It's why we need that by-election, but to be honest, it's why I think we also need a general election as soon as possible as well, because this chaos goes wider than Nadine Dorries.
OK, Yvette Cooper.